Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we are going to feature one of our last quilt kits, at least the last one we're going to be able to show you guys that we were able to make with sample yardage from Nocturne, my first fabric collection with QT Fabrics. It's a collaborative collection that we put together, and it features my favorite colors in the whole wide world. You can see behind me that the colors match well with my home, and they're also actually quite trendy right now with the teals and the citrons and some charcoals and Napoleonic blue. I just love it. We're coming out with a video today because our pre-order deadline is tomorrow, October 11th. So if you want to pre-order and you want this fabric, we highly encourage you to do that because we just don't know how much you guys are going to want. This is the first time we've done a fabric collection, and I just have nothing to base my order on except what you guys pre-order. Now we are going to order some extra, so what we're going to do, if you see this video October 12th or later and you want to know when this stuff is available, just join the wait list for the fabrics that you want or the kits that you want, and you'll be the first to know when we make that available after we have filled all of the pre-orders when the fabric arrives in January of 2020 or 2021. 2020 can't get over fast enough. I think we all can agree on that. Anyway, so now to Trellis. So this is a pattern that we originally did for Stashin with Stephanie, and I used it and I split the fabrics up in light, medium, and dark, and so it was a very scrappy background, and it was pretty, but there was a lot going on, and so I think it actually looks a whole lot better in Nocturne because what we did was we used one of the light neutrals, that wood grain, and we used a single neutral for the entire thing, and then I fussy cut all those owls to go in the center, and then the pluses just really popped and the owls really popped because that one neutral really gave the eye a place to rest and helped everything else stand out. So I really like this version even better than the original that we did to go with this. Now we are revamping the pattern just a smidge. Those owls can only be fussy cut to a certain width, and it's smaller than the original square in the original Trellis pattern. So if you get the kit, then you're going to get a special paper version of Trellis that has different sizes. It's just a smidge smaller than the original. Still is really pretty. Still, it comes in multiple sizes, but the kit is just available in the one size. As you can see it here on my king size bed. So it's a pretty good size quilt for lounging around, or a twin bed or something like that. We're going to have it on our couch here at my house once this video is all over. But this is super simple. One thing you're going to notice in the video I did strip piecing to piece those centers, and for this one you can't do that if you are using the owls because you have to fussy cut those. So what you're going to do is you're going to fussy cut the owls, and then you're going to assemble the frames around them. It's not hard. We're going to explain how to do it in the pattern, but if you want to see how that is done, we have a video on fussy cutting that we did with Nocturne, and we have a video on adding those frames. You can watch the beginning of the night sky video tutorial that we put out a couple of days ago because we did that with that, just as you're going to have white going around the owls instead of the blue and the citron. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the tutorial so you can see that this is really a very simple quilt. It's pretty easy to go through. The only difference between this tutorial and from the original quilt and what you'll do here again is instead of strip piecing those centers, you're going to fussy cut your owls, then sew your sides on separately. So it's still pretty quick. I got mine together in about 2 days. I worked a lot of hours in those 2 days. So probably like a long weekend or a week, if you're sewing a couple hours a night, you could totally get this done. It's not challenging. It's not hard. It's very simple, straightforward seams. It's just a good idea to have a nice bed to lay everything out on so you can keep those pluses straight as you're working. All right, so I hope you enjoy this. Again, if you like Nocturne, you need some of it in your life, we have bag kits, we have quilt kits, we have beginner-friendly quilt kits. We have yardage that you can order bundles. So check that all out. You have until October 11th to pre-order, and after that, we're going to shut everything down for a little while, and you can join a wait list if there's something that you like that you weren't able to get, and we'll let you know when it is available again in early 2021. Like I said though, if you something you absolutely need, I would get it then, because we are ordering extra, but there's really going to be no guarantees that you're going to be able to get what you want. So order now if that's something you want. All right, so here is a tutorial on Trellis. You can watch that and decide if you want to get some. But thanks so much to everyone who's followed along with these videos. You guys are the reason why I even have a fabric collection, so it's super exciting, and big thanks to you guys, and to everyone who's already ordered, thank you. And until next time, happy quilting. All right, now here is the replay of our original Trellis tutorial. So I was able to get all of my blocks sewn for this in a couple of hours, just like an afternoon of sewing. It went pretty easy, and it's because we're going to strip piece everything. What I've done, refer to your pattern instructions, which you can get over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and you'll be able to download this pattern. It's free if you're a member of Stashin with Stephanie. It's called Trellis. And so you're going to cut everything to size, and what I've done is I've got my strips here that will become a block, and then I also have my outsides that are sort of the garden trellis part of it that sort of hold up the flowers. So we're going to sew this baby together with some strip piecing, so really fast, really easy. So to strip piece, you're just going to lay one piece on top of the other, and then I usually line up my selvages at the edge. And then keeping the edges of your fabric even with each other and the side of your presser foot, you're just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam down the side. Don't worry about pinning. What I do is I just kind of lay the strip next to each other for as much as will fit on the base of my sewing machine here. And then I just hold my fingers there and sew. And when my fingers reach that part, I just line it up again and repeat until I'm done with the strip. I'm just doing one of these on camera today, but when you're done, you can just chain piece and do the next one right afterwards, and that saves a ton of time and some thread. All right, I've got this one done. I'm going to flip around and strip piece to the other side as well. So again, we're just going to lay it so that our fabrics are right sides together, and that our edges are nice and lined up and even with the edge of your presser foot, and just sew. I really like to press my seams open as much as possible because that makes for a really flat quilt top, so I'm going to do that here next. So to press your seam open, first you've got to open it up. So what I just do is I put my fingertips in and get that open. Then I'm going to put the very tip of my iron on the seam, and I kind of hold my fingers down ahead of the seam. It kind of finger presses it open and makes it easy to go kind of quick, and I just kind of go straight down that seam. And when I'm done, I'm also going to press it from this side as well. But what you're looking for is to have just a nice straight line. You don't want any wiggles in there. If there are wiggles, then that means there's a pleat. You're going to be able to see that from the other side. So press both sides of your seam down, and then we'll move on to the next step. So now we're going to cut this into rectangles, so that way we can put our side pieces on to turn it back into a square. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square this edge up. So getting my ruler, and I am using my 12.5 inch frosted from Olfa to do this, just because the measurement is wider than my standard 6 by 24 inch ruler. So I want to make sure that I'm not having to use the mat to measure, because then I can get everything nice and square here. And you'll see how I do that. So what I'm doing is I've got an inch line of the ruler even with those seam allowances. That way I know that it's going to be nice and square when I butt it up next to the next piece. So I'm moving this over as far as I can because I want to be able to get as much of this fabric as possible. Once I have everything aligned, I'm just going to go ahead and square up that edge. You can move that to the side. Now flipping everything around, my cut edge is now on the left side. I'm right-handed, so I'm always cut on the right side. If you're a lefty, then it's going to be different for you. So now I'm going to measure again, and this time the measurement I need to cut to is lined up with that edge I just trimmed, and then I'm still making sure that my inch lines are lined up with those seam allowances, again making sure everything is still nice and square. So once I've got everything lined up the way I want it, I'm going to give it a little trim. And then this is ready for my outsides. I'm going to go ahead and cut down the rest of my strip. You can see how this goes really fast because instead of having to cut all these little pieces first and then sew them together, we're able to sew them first and then trim, which is a ton faster because you already pretty much have your block together. So next up, we're going to take our little pieces and we're going to flip them right sides together and sew down the sides, and then we are done with our block. So it goes super, super fast. You can see how this quilt is pretty quick to assemble in terms of the blocks, and you'll see how it's not so bad either when we get to assemble the top in just a second. All right, so I'm just taking one of these and putting it right sides together. You can pin this if you want, but everything should be the right size as long as you have an accurate 1/4 inch seam and you've cut accurately. So I just line up my top corners and then my edges as usual, and I'm just going to sew down. And this is how I get away from pinning. Now sometimes you're not perfectly accurate, so what I do at this point is I'll just take my point of my fabric and I'm just going to line it up so that my edges, as you can see on the side, are nice and even with these corners down here. Then I just put my fingertip on there and I'm just going to hold it steady, just like I did when I was strip piecing. And rather than having to pin those sides and take that time to do it, this is how I make sure that everything stays nice and in line and square. So there we go. We've got that side done. I'm going to go ahead and chain piece the rest of these, and then we're going to go down the other side. All right, now it's time to sew everything down the other side. So now it's time to press our seams open again. And again, I like to press those open rather than to one side because it makes your quilt lace so flat, and that really opens up the possibilities for what you can do in quilting. So just like before, I'm gonna go ahead and open that seam up. The one difference is you have this seam here that you don't wanna press and accidentally flip going the other direction. So you just kind of want to be careful of that, and if you accidentally do press it and flip one side over, just press it back when you're all done. But it just goes pretty quick. You can see these blocks are coming together really fast. I just got 3 blocks together in super fast time, and it's just so quick. Go ahead and press this from the front side too. And now we've already got 1 block finished. I'm gonna go ahead and press the other 2. And we've been sewing for, it took me about 20 minutes to get this far, and that includes the intro. So maybe like 15 minutes to get 3 blocks together, which is so fast if you're doing a quilt. Love strip piecing for that. So when you sew this together, the sashing bits kind of make a plus sign. So I used all my dark prints for the center of my blocks, and I used my medium prints for my sashing, and my light prints for my connector pieces that kind of look like the garden trellis. So this is a part where if you wanted it to look less busy, I would just get yardage, 1 piece of yardage for all your background prints, and it'll give the eye a place to rest more so. The eye does move around really well when you use these fabrics, but you can always just go with 1 and call it a day and have it be a little less busy when you're working with it. But what I wanted to do was make it so that the plus was out of the same fabric. So I've got this part here, my center, and then there would be a piece above here that would be the same as this one. So all the pluses are the same, and then same over here. So if you wanted to just mix it up and just have color value be your guide, go for it. But I really liked laying everything out and making it work that way. I just use the spare bed or the floor. That works really well. So this part's super easy. You just lay everything out as you go. I kind of laid out 2 rows at a time, so that way I could have the row above and the row below and have my little pieces above and below there for this part of it. And then in this case, you're just sewing end to end to sew them all together. In this one, you're also going to sew end to end. And what I kind of did as I was putting this together to make life a little easier for me is I sewed all of these bits in 1 row at the same time. And I already had everything laid out on the floor, so that way once I got these all sewn together, I could just go lay it back in that spot and know that everything was facing the right direction, like this print was facing that print and all that good stuff. Same here, is facing that one. And then I would sew, once I had all these together, I would sew them to the edge of the blocks and then join my blocks. And I just kept laying it back out in between each step, so that way I made sure everything was in the right spot and I had to rip as little as possible. Then what I did is I sewed all these, so I would join my little pieces to my bigger pieces all the way down and then lay it back out, make sure everything was in the same spot, and just keep repeating until you have bigger and bigger strips, and then finally your rows together. So I'm going to show you real quick how I sewed these together. I'm going to go ahead and take this stuff away for now so it's not so confusing, but I'm going to show you how I sewed these together joined it to here, and then I'm going to show you how I joined my rows because there are no seams to join when you're putting your rows together. So strip piecing, awesome, goes really fast. The laying out part, if you want to be really specific, it is going to take a little bit more time, but it's not hard. You just kind of have to lay it out and decide where you want everything to be. And again, I just did 2 rows at a time, so that way it wasn't like overwhelming to get everything in place. And then no seams to match. So this is really fun. It could be a really fast quilt. And with all these florals, it would make a great one to work on for the spring and summer. So let's get sewing. So I know that I am typically a huge fan of chain piecing. Anything to make it go faster is better. But for me, having to rip out less is faster. So in this case, I did sew every single one of these individually. I brought them all over in one stack, but then I would sew one side to that center strip there. We're just gonna sew our regular 1/4" seam. Match up those corners. Again, I don't pin these because they're just a little short seam. You're not going to get too far off on them as long as you cut accurately. Then I would break thread rather than chain piece, lay it back out, and now I'm going to sew this piece to the other side of my little center guy here. All right, so I've got this little guy sewn together. I would just kind of stack those up until I got all of them done in one row. Again, sewing each little bit individually. So my big bits and then my little rectangle in there. And again, for all your cutting instructions and layout diagrams, make sure you go and get the pattern Trellis over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. And now I've got to press this and we're going to start sewing our rows together. So again with these, I'm going to press those seams open. I just have to be careful that I'm not pressing the other seam going in a weird direction as I'm doing that. So sometimes I kind of angle my iron a little bit. That way I'm not crossing over this. And then just press that on the same side. So now what I would have done is I would have laid out my entire row and I would have flipped all of these right sides together with the one on the left. And then I would stack them all up and sew them all down this seam and then press them and put them right back out and make sure everything is still in the same spot. Now at this point I would not have sewn the skinny stashing strips above and below because I want to use that when I lay it back out to make sure that I've got it lined up in the right spot so that these parts are matching. I'll just lay it out real quick so you can see that. So you can see here I've already sewn together this sashing bit. So I would have laid everything out and I would have been able to see that this part is matching with the sashing strip above it. And so then I know that I've laid it back out in the right orientation and I'm good to sew. So once I do all that, flip it together, sew, press, double check you've got it in the right spot again, and continue sewing your row together until it's all done. All right, so I finished sewing my row together and I've already got these sewn together. It's really simple. You're just sewing your pieces together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip these right sides together and pin. This is your last chance to make sure that if you have decided to make all your pluses the same color, to make sure that they are in fact lining up. These are. And what I'm just going to do here, there are no seams to match here. Everything is all offset, which is fabulous. It means you can get everything done really fast. So I'm just going to pin it right sides together and I'm just going to first line up this corner. And just like when we were working with the littler pieces, you just want to get your corners nice and even. And go ahead and put a pin in there. And then I'm going to scooch all the way down to the edge here. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to line up these corners as well. Now what I like to do here is kind of grab my corners, and this works best when you have a nice flat surface to lay down on. But if you can lay it as flat as you can, then you can kind of get the middle of your row and you can kind of segment it from there. So here's about the middle. Just going to go ahead and give that a little pin. And then I'm just going to, again, segment that. So here's about halfway. Lining those edges up. And then do the same thing about a quarter of the way in between each of those. Now I'm going to repeat that on the other half. Obviously it's not super precise. Things could move a little bit as you are sewing, but as long as you stay mostly where you should be, then your ends are going to end up where you want them and you're going to have nice square rows. So I'm going to go ahead and pin the rest of this, and then we'll press and we'll have our first row ready to go, and you'll know everything you need to do to finish this quilt top at home. Just like every other seam in this quilt, I'm going to press this open. You just kind of have to be a little careful as you're going along to make sure you're not flipping any of these other seams, and there's a lot at this point going in another direction as you press. But look at how flat that lays. It's just super nice. So I'm going to finish pressing, then we'll flip it over and take a peek. Oh, now this is just so cute. I love these metallics. I love how everything is framed up. As always, we will show you some photos of the finished quilt so you can see what it looks like all together and quilted and pretty. But I just love how this works with the different color values, with the mediums and the pluses, the darks and the blacks, and then the lighter ones sort of connecting everything. I think it's really fun. I think it is great for the summertime, but again, you could do this in any number of prints. This is a pattern that you really could do with any fat quarter bundle. And again, if you want to get in on the Stashin with Stephanie fun, we're going to have kits available for this quilt as long as supplies last on our website, shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. The pattern is called Trellis. You can get it and use it with your stash or any fat quarter bundle. And you can always join the Stashin with Stephanie program also at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. We link to everything in the video description down below. If you enjoy our videos and you want to build your stash, that's a great way to support us and get some goodies for yourself. Again, you end up getting, if you take advantage of all the discounts, 18 free yards of fabric and 12 free patterns a year, plus access to all of the other Stashin with Stephanie patterns that we have done to date. So that's cool. It's a great deal, and you can really bust your stash and whittle it down this year. So thank you so much for following, and until next time, happy quilting.